Thanks everyone for joining. Today's topic is very, very topical. Talking about ransomware. It's something that is very much in the news. We hear a lot of people talking about it. You see those headlines about organizations getting caught, in a ransomware battle. And so we want to kind of dive into it from a much, much more technical deep dive perspective on, some of the behind the scenes actions that take place. You're going to hear a lot about, how do we prevent malware or ransomware? I'm not really going to focus on that a lot today. What happens after you get infected is sometimes a forgotten about topic, because all these organizations that you see that are hit by these attacks, it's not that they didn't have firewalls and antivirus and protections and SIMs and all these things. They had all of that and they still got infected. So I want to focus a little bit more about how that potentially happened, the infrastructure associated with that, and then maybe some things that you can do, after the fact to maybe stop the bleeding a little bit and try and recover a little bit more from it. So I like to keep this very, very interactive. Remember, I can't hear you. We've got a lot of people on the webinar today. Please use that Q&A section. There's a chat and a Q&A. Just please pop that in the Q&A section here. We've got Larry and Dave here helping me out. They're going to put those questions up on a screen that I can see. So as we're going along, please ask those questions. We don't have to wait and save them for the end. So, okay, let's start talking a little bit more about some theoretical concepts around the kill chain associated with ransomware. What is the process for an infection? We need to understand that better before we start talking about the cure. That kind of comes a little bit later. Let's break it down and let's even go through it a little bit. We can actually walk through exactly what this process looks like from a malicious person's perspective. And that'll give you hopefully a little bit better perspective on how this works. Okay, so what are the steps? What do we start with? Well, first of all, we have something like phishing. So phishing is the process of telling an end user to click on a link, to submit a form, to give a username and password, a version of social engineering that is usually targeted in something like email to do something, to click on a link maybe that they're not supposed to. They're getting really sophisticated at this. If you haven't seen some of the most recent ones, we've got some really cool examples of it that we'll have a new employee start here at NCSI. And what do? Oh, well, we go on LinkedIn and we make an announcement. Oh, we're so excited. New employee X is joining our team. We've had this happen twice now. Our two most recent hires, within 3 days of their new date of starting, they get a fake email from the CEO of our organization saying, I'm in a closed door meeting. I need you to do this. I need you to click on that, et cetera, et cetera. So they're getting sophisticated. It's not, hey, emailing the Nigerian, prince anymore. It comes from the CEO of your brand new organization and it asks you to click on something and you're an employee for 3 days. You haven't gone through any training yet. You're brand spanking new. So they're getting really crafty with things like that. So phishing is, usually the place that we're going to start. Then I need to infect. How am I going to infect? There's an entire argument, and most of ransomware focuses on this aspect right here. You have a piece of software or a website or something, and you are attempting to infect that particular machine. We're not really going to focus on that today because you're going to hear that from a lot of other places. A lot of antivirus vendors or, this new age antivirus that we have out there, they're really going to be focusing on that. And I don't want to say, well, that's where all of our protection is going to come from, is from that, prevention of infection phase. There's a lot more going on there. I want to focus on the other aspects of it because, again, in all of these attacks that you've heard recently, of course, they had malware protection on it, and they probably spent a lot of money on this new age fancy stuff, yet the machine was still infected. So I want to kind of skip past that, talk about the other aspects of it. Next, we have a command and control infrastructure. So if I'm a malicious attacker and I want to break into your systems, I need to be able to tell that piece of malware what to do, how to operate, how to behave, et cetera, things like that. The reason I need to do that is I can't just have it be static. I can't just say, hey, the code is hard-coded in there on how it's going to behave and how it's going to go and infect your organization. I need it to be under my control in order to kind of go through this process. We'll talk a little bit more about why that's the case, but we have a command and control infrastructure associated with that. All right, next I need to do recon. I want to break into your organization I am not going to simply say, hey, I infected one computer. Well, I guess that's it. Great. I'm going to go do my process. I'm going to turn on encryption, whatever. I want to find out more information. Ransomware is interesting, but you know what? There's plenty of other information there that might be more valuable. You know, hey, I might get $1,000 out of Bitcoin out of you from decrypting your machine, but maybe there's, you know, $100,000 worth of social security numbers on a system that you have access to, or, you know, something like that. So I need to do some reconnaissance, understand what your environment now looks like now that I'm inside. And then I need to do things like spreading. You know, I need to go laterally. I have landed on, you know, Bob the janitor's computer. That's interesting and all, but, you know, what do I do from here? I want to go and jump and go somewhere else. What kind of access do I have out there? So I need to do, after my reconnaissance, I need to spread the infection past even just the initial infection point, because what if that machine gets cleaned up and that piece of malware gets taken care of? I don't want to be completely locked out at that point. So after that, I want to escalate. Back to the example, escalate, don't know how to spell. After I get on that janitor's computer, well, that person doesn't have rights. They don't have admin rights. They don't have the ability to go and do anything good. So I need to increase my perception or increase my my rights that I have in that organization to, you know, to do more harm at that point. I want to exfiltrate. I want to get information out of the organization. You know, again, just encrypting all the stuff. Well, what if there's good information inside of there? You know, exfiltration, very, very popular for, you know, nation states. You know, if the Chinese government is a part of this, maybe they're trying to steal secret plans or something like that. And so they're trying to get the data out. They don't want to, you know, show their hand yet of how much access they have into your system. And then the last thing we do is we actually go and encrypt. So the problem is that we usually only see the last stage of this. We only see the encryption part of it and not the other components in here. And that's what I kind of want to focus on is command and control, recon spread, escalating, exfiltrating, and then talk about the encryption phase. Just sometimes we're obsessed with that last part and the first part, but there's a lot going on in the middle there. You know, a good example of that is the concept of a lot of these post-mortems that you read about when you hear, you know, XYZ organization was hacked into, or, you know, XYZ organization had a ransomware attack. When they really break it down, and I love these analysis that you see from these various agencies that really break down the individual details. Oftentimes, these phases at the top are much, much earlier than the phases down there at the bottom. You know, they may have broken in, you know, in June, and we didn't actually see the results of it of exfiltration or encryption until, you know, September or something like that. What were they doing for those months of time, you know, on those systems? So those are the kinds of things we want to, you know, understand a little bit more about. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to walk through how to do this. Now, first of all, this is for education purposes only. Everything I'm going to show you here is publicly available information, but you know, it would be considered a crime if I was actually going to do this against someone's machine that was not a willing participant in this. So everything I'm going to demonstrate is just simply education only. But these are the kinds of tools that the malicious actors use out there. It's not going to be exactly like this. This is just an example of a way that it could behave, but most of them follow this same kind of logic for, you know, the command and control structure and the phishing and, you know, et cetera, things like that. So let's talk about my infrastructure of what we're going to demonstrate here today. Okay, I've got several different machines out here. So these are my workstations that have my users you know, running on them. And, you know, I have a firewall that they sit behind. And then, you know, of course, we've got the internet up here. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to run a piece of software that's called LimeRat. So this is just an example education tool around malware. RAT stands for, you know, remote access tool. It's going to smell and feel a lot like some of the management tools that we as IT administrators use on a day-to-day basis. And that's not an accident. That's actually totally normal because that's really all that we're doing here. Just the end result is something malicious. We do lots of this. We infect, that's just installing an agent. Command and control, that's just my SCCM server that gives out commands. Recon, oh, that's doing discovery on the network. We do these things all the time inside of IT. We just don't go and do the malicious things kind of at the tail end of it, or have a nefarious entry into the organization. So it's not a surprise that it has some very similarities to our traditional management tools. But it's going to be a little bit different here. So here's what happens after I infect. When I go through here and get to that infection phase, I install a piece of software on that workstation. I install, for lack of a better term, an agent. We're so used to the concept of agents in our industry. That's really all that it is. I install an agent on that workstation. Here's what happens. I'm going to use something up here called Pastebin. So Pastebin is a website of, creating a unique URL that then has some amount of text inside of that gets rendered out to users. In this case, I'm going to have my agent go and talk to that Pastebin URL to find out where the command and control structure is. And in this case, it's going to say, oh, by the way, here's the IP address over here of the command and control infrastructure. So it checks that first, then it's going to come back over here and actually talk to my command and control structure. So that's kind of the concept of what's happening here. I tell the machine, after I infect it, I give it direction from Pastebin, and then I find it over in my LimeRat software, and that's how I'm actually going to, infect the machine. So these are the phases that we're talking about. I want to talk about these kind of first phases right here. We're going to go through this process right here. The example of phishing, how do I protect against that? We're not really going to cover that topic today. That's a multifaceted topic around, email protection and end user training and a bunch of different stuff like that. We're gonna save that for a different conversation. However, we do have a pretty cool function in it in the Ivanti portfolio of something called Mobile Threat Defense that can scan URLs on a person's mobile device, regardless of where they came from. If they came from a text message or came from a Facebook link or something like that, still look at those URLs and be able to potentially protect against them, even though they didn't come through the traditional ecosystem, kind of through the front door. So we're going to jump to this. How do I infect? How do I do command and control, and kind of walk through that process? Okay, let's come over here and let's walk through a little bit more what I'm talking about. I'm going to show it to you in action. So let me show you a little bit more about my environment that I have today. Let me just get logged in here really quick. Okay. So here I have a Windows 10 machine. I'm going to use this as my attack machine. I also have some workstations that are, going to be representative of the, of our end users that we're attacking. So here's the application that we're going to be using today. Again, this is just an example of tools that are out there that do this kind of thing. Not everyone uses this. They don't all work exactly the same way, but they should get us thinking about it. LimeRat is a very easy to use tool. It's not very difficult to set up. As funny as it sounds, it's got good documentation on how to set it up and how it works, and it has a nice, friendly interface. So, it's great for the person that wants to do light levels of malware. It's not a lot of programming or code or anything like that. How would we go and build our malware to report back to us? Well, here's kind of the section that we would do that. Here's the builder section. I'm going to go in and say, what is the URL we're going to use for command and control connectivity? Why I do this is what happens if, as part of the infection process, people go and find, oh, they're connecting to server X. We need to find that and stop that down. Well, maybe I want to change that. So I have this Pastebin URL. And if we actually open it up here, I have it right here, pastebin.com/raw, and then the actual URL itself that I went and created. In that URL, all it does is return back an IP address and a port. Now, I'm using it all private IP addresses here just to stay on my network and not be on the internet. In the real world, this would be a public-facing internet address that would be accessible. It would probably be somewhere in like AWS, that's a popular place. And I can create an AWS account and have it move around. So as you've heard of things like IP reputation services. Hey, is this IP good? Is this IP address bad? I could have this change once an hour and have the AWS command command and control server, change IP addresses on a regular basis, and they would be programmed to check back in and find that new address on a regular basis. So this is a great way for me to shuffle around and potentially avoid some levels of detection. So that's the command and control IP address that we're going to connect to. Down here, we have the section called install. Should we install the application or not? The difference between install and non-install is should we be permanent and should we run as a different executable? So, here's an example where I said, yes, let's go ahead and install it. And our executable should be for sure not malware.exe. That's pretty obvious. What about something like, print server.exe? Are people going to be suspicious of that? Hey, that looks totally normal. Nothing really surprising there. So a great way to try and hide by, running a very common sounding name out there. Next, we have over here things like anti-virtual machine protection. There's great examples of that where a lot of this fancy malware protection that we have out there these days says, oh, what we're going to do is we're going to download it and we're going to run it inside of a test system and see how it behaves. Well, I can just simply say, if I can detect if it's inside of a virtual machine, just don't run. Don't act maliciously, act normally. So yeah, let's absolutely go turn that on. Next, what about spreading via USB? Wouldn't that be great? We talked about as part of the kill chain, I want to move from machine to machine laterally. I just have to check that box. And now it's going to, absolutely put itself on every USB drive that gets plugged in this device. And, spreading it as a pin taskbar application, is an option there as well. Here's a Bitcoin grabber address. Oh, this is great. Why don't we automatically, if you happen to be using Bitcoin, go and attempt to steal that Bitcoin and take it off the machine? I could put the location of the address wallet I want to send it to. Maybe I want to choose a different icon over here. And should I have .NET included as part of it, 2.0 or 4.0? I just then click on build right here and go through and build that process. I already have mine built out right here. It looks something like this. Okay, if we go into my share here, and again, I could name the file whatever I want. I can have it run the process as anything I want. I just simply need to get the user to execute this now. Again, we're skipping over the phishing and infection phase, and we're assuming that that's already happened to see a little bit more about what happens on the backside. So let's jump over here to our one of our target machines. This is going to be a machine that we have that is going to potentially be infected for us. So, if we opened up this machine and had access to the share, they would simply execute this via whatever mechanism we have crafted from a phishing or other kind of malware perspective, exploiting a zero-day exploit, exploiting something around patch management. That's something we haven't talked a lot about. How does that infection work? Well, a lot of the times it comes in due to an unpatched system. An unpatched version of Chrome or Firefox or Internet Explorer allows executables to be run when they're not supposed to. So that's going to execute on one of our machines. And then let's go back over here to our attacker. We're going to take a look at the client section here. So what's happening here is showing me all of the devices that I have that are active and communicating with me. And I have a couple in there from the past. And look, I even have a notification box. Isn't that convenient for me? They were so thoughtful when they wrote this malware to say, we'll even pop up and give you a notification to say when it happens. Oh, look at that. I just had a brand new connection come across there. And it told me the IP address, told me the user that's logged into, and things like that. And it now shows up as this green bar here, in the listing of all the different agents that are online. I can go to the thumbnail section here, and I can get a screenshot of all of the devices out there. Remember how we talked about the reconnaissance phase? I might have a recon phase of a month or 2 months or 3 months. This way, it makes it so that I can kind of keep an eye on the 5 machines I've infected at your organization. What are they doing day to day? I don't want to sit there and watch them all day long and open up their boring spreadsheets and attend their meetings. I want to wait for something juicy to come up. So I'm going to have it right here. You can see I have it set to refresh every 5 seconds. Every 5 seconds, I'm taking a screenshot of these machines that are on the other side of the world, for all I know, and presenting it to me, and then I can do something about it if I choose as the malicious user. So let's go back over here to clients and talk about what I can do next. All right, So I've got a brand new machine. And if we go back over here, nothing happened. I don't notice anything. I'm a regular end user and I don't know that anything's happened. I'm just going about my day-to-day work. And if, we wanted to get into the, nitty-gritty details of it, we could see different applications running and we could see that client functioning, or, if I would have went and named it as something else, for sure not malware, I could try and hide it. So right here's the example of that executable running. It's not in install phase. It's only a one-time run kind of a thing, but I could have had it run there permanently. So the user's going about and just, doing their daily stuff. All right, so when I right-click on that machine, look at the things that I can do. I've got some really cool plugins in here. Ransomware, we're going to do that kind of later, but I could lock the screen. I could open up the file manager, another great reconnaissance tools right here. Again, in our example, this is across the world and it's only on the internet. I don't have VPN access. I didn't hack through your firewalls or anything crazy like that. I simply am able to do this with a simple internet connection, and they're calling home to me to be able to do this. So, let me go look at your C drive. Let me go dig around, see if I can find anything juicy. Maybe you have access to, some network shares that have some good data on it or something like that. What other things can I do? I could go in here and remote desktop where I could actually see your screen in real time and maybe even change something on it. I could look at the system details. We've got a convenient password stealer here. It's very cumbersome to go and try and find all your saved passwords on that machine. Why don't I just glean all of them off and have them show up right here? Cryptocurrency stealer. Oh, this is fabulous. I love this. You're a fan of cryptocurrency, things like, Bitcoin. For those that aren't familiar, Bitcoin is an electronic currency that doesn't exist in the real world. It only exists in the electronic world. And so you have a wallet, which is just a, for lack of a better term, it's just a folder on your computer that contains those coins. And this would go out and try and attempt to steal them if they were, sitting there in the open in an unencrypted format. I could steal those Bitcoins and transmit them to my wallet. I could turn on a miner, an actual cryptocurrency miner that is attempting to use the CPU and power cycles that your computer derives to attempt to earn various cryptocurrencies. What if I want to do a DDoS? I don't care about your machine. It wasn't important. You're just some home user somewhere with nothing good. I'm going to fire up a DDoS against my actual target, and your machine is going to be part of that DDoS attack. Or maybe I want to go turn on Windows RDP because that's, part of the process of, getting onto it for a more coordinated attack. Well, let's go up here to our ransomware. In my example, we've done our reconnaissance. We've sat there for weeks or months or years watching your users, watching your network, deciding what we want to do. And in our example, we've decided now is the time to act. I'm going to go and encrypt. So I'm going to hit the little encrypt button. It's going to pop up here and say, okay, what do I want my message to the end user to be? It says all your files have been encrypted. Please play us 0.02 Bitcoin. Someone have to look up how much the price of that is today. I think that's a little bit low. I'm getting greedy. I want 20 Bitcoins. What's the market value of Bitcoin these days? $50,000. I want $1 million. And then I could put the Bitcoin address in here. Please, everyone, if you take my techniques and learn what you're doing and actually do this, please give me a cut. Put my Bitcoin address in here and send me some of the profits. No, sorry, I'm joking there. Oh, look, I can have a cool background with an awesome looking skull. Oh, I love that. Says all your files have been locked. Ooh, that looks awesome. Let's go ahead and send that out. All right. So that command has now been issued through the command and control structure to our end user. Now, our end user is not going to see anything right away. What we need to do is we actually need to go and encrypt that. That's going to take some amount of time. And if we watch our CPU process here, we'll see it eventually start to go up and have some more, CPU memory, and really disk will be our biggest indicator, that this is happening, because we have to read through a lot of the files and actually encrypt them and then write them back out to disk. So we're going to see a big spike in this kicking off eventually to actually go and encrypt this machine. Let me skip over to one that I've already done this to really quick, just so you can you don't have to sit there and wait for the process. The encryption process all depends on how long how long, how many machines or how many files that you have on your machine, and various CPU and disk reading stats and things like that. So this will take some amount of time. It'll probably be done before we're finished here. On average, it's usually only about 20 or 30 minutes on my test machines here. But notice what's happened. Okay, now this is the end result. This is the end of that encryption process. You can see we've changed the user's background to have that really cool skull image that we put up on there. We've popped open with a text box here saying all of your files are encrypted, and it actually lists out the files that have been encrypted. And if we try and go and open things up, we're going to see like there's a .lime extension on the end of everything. Everything is not a Word document, Excel document, executables, things like that. It has all been renamed with a .lime extension on the end of that. And the file is now encrypted, and I can't get that without doing something about it. So they're done. That machine is now encrypted. The cat's out of the bag. They see it, and they know that they need to send their Bitcoin information to our certain address that we did. So now let's just say, for example, you as an end user has to do something about it. What do? Well, that's a good question. A lot of people are talking about like ransomware insurance. Your normal insurance company will actually offer you ransomware insurance. And so that makes it even worse. Now, as a malicious actor, I know that this insurance exists. So I'm going to go and target these companies knowing it's not even their own money that they're going to pay me with. They're going to pay, the insurance company's going to pay that. So why do they even care? They'll just write me the check and move on. If that ransomware insurance wasn't there, I might be a lot more hard pressed to pick my targets. But I know, as counterintuitive as that sounds, ransomware insurance from our insurance providers is going to make this problem worse. It's not going to make it better because the payoffs are just going to be a lot easier, and the company actually doesn't take it out of pocket. So you're the malicious, or you're the end customer, I'm the malicious user. You've paid me the ransom via Bitcoin. I have an option to go in here and right click and say plugins and go to the Lime ransomware, and then the option to choose decryption, and kind of go through that process and actually go through and de-encrypt that. Now, here's my favorite part of this entire process. Do I have to? You gave me the money via Bitcoin. Bitcoin is, for the most part, anonymous. There's some caveats to that, but it's anonymous information. It's not like back in the day. I remember one of my customers got a fax. That's kind of how old this was, but they got a fax saying, we're DDoSing your website. We want this ransom, and here's our bank account in the Cayman Islands. Please wire us this money. Now with Bitcoin, it is a relatively quick transfer. They can get me that money in a couple of hours. What makes me, as the malicious actor, obligated to go back in here and decrypt your equipment or give you the password to decrypt it? Nothing. I don't have to pay out. There's no honor among thieves. I can absolutely say, sucks to be you. I'll just move on with life. I've got your money. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to go through the process of even decrypting it. So paying off the ransom is not even necessarily an answer every single time. It all just depends on what that particular user chooses to do with that. So now we've kind of seen the back end and understood a little bit more about what the systems are going to look like here. What are we going to do about this? We talked about, the problem. I want to come back over here and talk about a little bit more of some of the fixes that we have associated with it. So we already talked about the infrastructure and the command and control, how all that works. How do I prevent that kind of process from happening? So we've already talked about phishing and where that model comes from, and our mobile threat defense can give us some options to look at those URLs on our mobile devices that are sometimes exposed there. Infection, this is actually a multitude of different things. First of all, you're going to hear about things like antivirus or next generation antivirus or malware protection and things like that. Those are great. We're not going to get rid of those. Not going away anytime soon. Absolutely go and invest in that and look at next generation versions of it. Those are very important. But those are not enough. We need to talk about more than that. We need to talk about patching. So a lot of patching these days is patching exploitable vulnerabilities inside of our various systems that are remotely exploitable, just across a network connection, or, inside the local machine. They can, do privilege escalation and various things like that. We need to worry about that and make sure that our machines are patched. It's not exciting, it's not sexy, but it's something that we really need to focus on, because that can be a very large avenue to get into around patching. If you take a look at a lot of the malware, most malware, not all, most malware exploits vulnerabilities that are greater than 60 days old, oftentimes a year old or 2 years old. Hey, this was using a patch or a vulnerability that was from last year. Well, we should have patched by now. Don't worry about this race to say, oh, the patch came out today, I need to have everything patched tomorrow. I found that to be sometimes counterproductive. You make a lot of enemies around patching and they push back on it. Just have a nice aggressive patching window that you try and get them patched. I think sometime in the month time frame is usually very reasonable, because most of that malware is after that 30-day mark. We're going to talk about command and control, recon, spread, exfiltration, encryption. We're going to talk about our Neurons platform. That's kind of what we're talking about today. So it can handle some help with a lot of these various things right here. But I want to talk about escalation. That's privilege escalation. We've got a really cool product called our application control that can do some cool things around things like admin privileges. Infecting the janitor's machine, what's on there? What am I going to do? How am I going to get anywhere? Oh, infecting someone on the phones here or on the webinar's machine. You've got a lot more juicy access. You've got remote access tools. You've got admin rights. There's a lot more going on there. So, but you're a smarter user. You're going to be probably sharper than the average user of not clicking on links and not paying attention to things like that. But what about the CEO? What about the programmers that had a big fight around admin rights? What about the old legacy application we have over in the finance department that requires admin rights? What do we do about all those? Those are a higher risk. So I want to talk about our application control, how we can limit those permissions and what they look like. So how do we understand more about the command and control, about this recon process, our privilege escalation, our spreading, and our encryption? What can we do about those various things? Okay, let's jump back over here and let's jump into our Neurons console. So, whoops, it logged me out. Let me get logged back into it. So those aren't familiar with Neurons. It is a cloud-based platform where we install a very small agent on your devices, and it's going to give us real-time information around this. And real-time is very key. The reason being is that the management tools we had of the past, things like Endpoint Manager or SCCM, they were very classic. And what does that mean? That's kind of a polite way of saying, well, hey, they were dated data, or old data. Here's the inventory scan of this machine 3 days ago. Well, that's pretty good, but I've got a malware infection right now. I need to know what's going on right now inside my organization. Again, I've got the CEO calling me and asking where we're at to fix this ransomware problem. The entire ecosystem is shut down. We sent home 4,000 employees. I need to have that real-time information. So we got some really cool real-time information that we present here that will tell me about even like their location, and kind of even go zoom in here and see my different machines that exist in the Utah area. I could scroll down here and take a look at one of the machines that I have. In this case, this is that target machine that we're actually using and playing around with. I can go and look at its CPU and memory. I can open it up here and even get a deeper dive into what's going on with it. What's chewing up a lot of the CPU and memory? Do they have any open tickets? How much hard disk space do they have available? A lot of that information I can get in real time. I'm asking for this information. We use an IoT protocol called MQTT, and I get this information just across the internet, and I can be querying thousands of devices for it. So, maybe I want to go and do a deep dive on the performance information here and sort based on the the CPU that we're using here, or search for a different process that we're executing, or maybe there's a service that we need to worry about. We had that big print spooler vulnerability that happened, a couple of months ago, and maybe I need to go in here and stop the spooler service because that's, part of the problem. So I could go and say, stop a particular service. But my edge intelligence lets me ask the system questions, and that really is key. So what if part of my troubleshooting, I've gone and I found that the connection that goes out to the server for the command and control infrastructure? Well, I could actually ask the system a question that. So if I come back over here and say, show me network connections to, and then the IP address of the command and control infrastructure. So right here, right now, all of these machines that are, home and at people's houses and whatever, I can very simply see that they are connecting to it. I can see what port they're connecting to. And then I could have some actions against that. So over here on the side, I could, create an action to isolate from the network, or restart the machine, or terminate a process, or turn on a firewall. Really the sky's the limit. I can click on manage right there and go create new quick actions using some of our automation framework. So those were just some examples that I put in there of what you would potentially want to do to those machines. So you can see I've now gone and asked thousands of machines and gotten a response within a couple of seconds. It takes a couple of seconds for it to render, but this is not even minutes or hours worth of time. It comes right back there and it gives me that information. What if I could run something else? Show me someone that's running a particular process, and you wouldn't search for Notepad. You'd probably search for the actual process that we saw there. What did we call it in our build? We called it not with malware, printserver.exe. So you might name it something interesting there. And then I can actually ask who's running that particular process. And this all was rendered in real time. This was not information from a SQL database from a month ago. No, we gave that information right here, right now. I can see the machines that are running it. Are they running it in an elevated process? And then again, I could create an action over here to, to go and stop that process. I can look at other states of the machine, show me the status of antivirus software on all of my machines. What's going on? Who's using what? Oh, we've got a lot of Microsoft Defender. Is it up to date? What's the pattern file say? Various things like that. What about things like the firewall? Show me the status of the firewall. Wait a minute. Why do we have some machines with the firewall off? Those shouldn't be the case. Let's go and, disable the firewall or enable the firewall on certain components. So I can have some actions that a human clicks, or I can even go and automate this to where I say, hey, if we find that the firewall is not equal to true, then run the action called enable the firewall. So, I don't need to have group policy. This can work on Mac and PC. Like, this particular query you can see at the top here is a Mac and a PC query. So I can see it for both types of operating systems. So this is how I can investigate what's going on right now when I'm in that infection phase. Someone's going through and trying to spread and do some reconnaissance associated with it. I can get a better understanding of what processes are running on my workstations, what kind of steps I could take against it, what kind of connections that are happening out there. And it, again, all in real time. That really is the thing that is usually the most important as part of a ransomware infection. Is I can't say, well, I need to wait 2 days for the inventory scans to run. I don't have that kind of time. I need to know that information, incredibly now, right now, not, at a future state. So the real-time information is, a huge part of this. And in some of the other webinars, we've talked about things like our Neurons for Healing, where we could actually have automated preventions against this, where we could go in and say, okay, if we find some action, we see a process running, or, we see that they're out of disk space, or their hard drive's failing, or they have a certain IP configuration, We can do all these different things, then take an action against them where we are, cleaning the hard drive up or creating a ticket or rebooting the machine or stopping a service or starting a service or turning on the firewall. So I can have these kinds of actions help with some cleanup after the fact. But a big part of that process is knowing the information right now, and the information from a couple of days is not good enough. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second. We've got several questions here that I want to run through, and I want to talk about a couple of other things. I know we've got only a few minutes left here, but so question here, I'm a current Endpoint Manager customer from Ivanti. Does this replace Endpoint Manager? So the short answer on that is no. Endpoint Manager is our inventory remote control systems management tool. It still exists, and it's just predominantly an on-premise technology. Our technology here in Neurons is exclusively cloud-based. And notice it's just a website that I'm logging into, and that's it. I don't need VPN connections. I don't need anything like that. All I need is a connection to the internet, and the system can communicate back and forth. We have connectors that let us connect to those other various data sources. Let me kind of give you a sneak preview on that, where I can connect to things. I can connect to my Endpoint Manager product right here, Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, things like that. So I have the ability to suck in data from those other data sources and digest that information, and even do certain things. Like when I connect over to Active Directory, I have the ability to have an action credentials for resetting passwords, unlocking accounts, things like that. So I can suck information in, and then I can push it out as well. So that's how I can interact with Endpoint Manager. This product right here today, probably the only thing that is going to be a deal breaker is the concept of patching. Patching, we don't have in Neurons today. It's going to be coming in Q1 of 2022, next year. And so that could be a potential replacement for Endpoint Manager. But until then, we still need that Endpoint Manager on-premise for doing the patching system. Is it compatible with SCCM? So short answer is yes. SCCM has a new name though, right? It's called Microsoft Endpoint. It's MECM. I think we have the name in it right here. I can't remember exactly what it's called. If you say add connector and then go down here to Microsoft MECM. So it's called Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager. That's the new name of SCCM. So absolutely, we're compatible with it. And so you can run, our agent and the SCCM agent at the same time. All right, another question here. Is it the same? Is the agent the same size as the Endpoint Manager agent? This is a great question because we have this coming up a lot. If you've used tools like SCCM or Endpoint Manager in the past, you've had a love-hate relationship with agents. We have to have the agents because that's kind of how we do our work, but they're slow and they're bulky and they take a long time to install, and you have to babysit them and you got to upgrade them, and you end up spending half your time babysitting the thing instead of actually getting the work done. I want to show you something here really quick. Let's go and look at the agent. I've done this many times, so I actually need to go and erase all of these. Show all, show all. We're going to erase all copies of this, just so I don't have a million copies right there. All right, let's go and install the agent. What does the Neurons agent look like to install? Well, we're going to download it right here. It opens up and there's a file and a options file that just gives it a configuration information. All right, you don't see this, but it's actually UAC. It's prompting for me UAC right now. All right, how long did it take the Endpoint Manager agent? It took, 15 minutes to install it, 20 minutes to install it. I want someone to get out their stopwatch and tell me how long it takes to install the Neurons agent. Oh, whoops, sorry, I went too fast. If you didn't see that or you blinked, our Neurons agent installs in about 5 seconds. And it has a very lightweight footprint of only about 20 megabytes or so. And it auto updates itself. It keeps itself up to date. You don't have to patch it. You don't have to do things like that. So it's a different kind of agent. Well, we've thrown away a lot of the technical debt. With all of these old technologies, we have so much junk in it from years past. I bet there's code inside of the Endpoint Manager agent and the SCCM agent that was compatibility for Windows 3.1. And it's still there. They don't clean house, they just add on top of. So this was built from the ground up to be a cloud-based technology. And it runs very, very quickly. It works without any kind of VPN connection or anything like that. And you saw it installs incredibly quickly as well. So we can have SCCM or Endpoint Manager actually push out the agent, and it can run very easily that way. Okay, another question. Isn't it true the current ransomware deployment tools are updated with current exploits, Hafnium and related stuff? The answer is absolutely yes. Again, I was just showing you an example. This LimeRat version, 0.1.9.2 was just simply a way to talk about it. They're not actually going to use this version that is going to be easily prevented by software that knows about it and so forth. They're absolutely going to have up-to-date exploits, and probably, the whole concept of a 0-day is they have them out there before the general public knows about that patch and before the vendors provided a patch for that vulnerability. So absolutely, a brand new piece of malware comes out. The print spooler. What was this last month about the print spooler? It was called like Print Nightmare or something like that. You better believe that malware and ransomware software was adapted to use that long before you ever heard about the vulnerability or got ready to try and patch that vulnerability. It was already done and built into tools. So yes, they are going to adapt and change associated with that. Next question. So how is this prevented by Ivanti tools? So the concept of prevention is something that you need to take a nuanced approach to. Anyone out there that's selling you a cure, well, I think they're selling you, a little bit of a bag of goods. It's all about layers of protection. We need to have multiple layers involved here. We talked about having mobile threat defense to look at our URLs on our mobile devices, having email protection to look for phishing links. We've talked about next generation antivirus and things like that. We have some things in the Ivanti portfolio that do that kind of antivirus and next generation antivirus. Our focus of today's webinar was not to talk about that, because you're going to hear everyone else talking about that and how they're going to be fabulous at blocking that exact infection. I want to focus on the other things, because what if they're not? What if there is a new vulnerability? What if they get around that? I wanted to bring into the equation other related things. Okay, how do they do CNC? How do they do recon? What do they do to encrypt? How could I find out the infection and where it's spread across all of my devices? I wanted to kind of focus on the things that are not preventing infection. I wanted to say, you know what, we're probably going to get infected. What do we do next? What is our step after that? I don't want to build the biggest wall in the world, and then, as soon as they realized, oh, hey, wait a minute, we can just go around that wall, be left in the open. It's always about layers out there. And so we wanted to really focus on that. All right, one more question about privilege escalation. Yes, I apologize. I talked about it earlier, but then we never actually jumped in and talked about how we can help prevent that. We have part of our tool set, our application control, that gives us the ability to go through and control privileges. I can go in here and say, hey, at a user privilege level, I want a user that's normally not an administrator to have the rights called built-in elevate. Give them admin rights only for this application. Or an individual component, give them admin rights only for the ability to open up printers, or to change hardware, or to stop a particular service, or things like that. So built-in elevate adds rights. Built-in restrict, this is my personal favorite, it takes away rights. How are you going to go to the CEO and say you're not an admin? Tough. If you can win that political battle, great. You need to write a book and sell it, because people will buy it. You're going to lose that battle oftentimes. So what do you do now? Well, let's talk about using built-in restrict to say, fine, you're an admin, good luck, have fun. I'm going to go in here to the section called antivirus, and I'm going to do a built-in restrict that says you cannot use the uninstall control for a built-in antivirus. So you can't remove it, or you can't remove my Ivanti applications, or you can't stop this service, or you can't terminate this process. You could log in as a domain admin for all I care. We're going to prevent you from doing those kinds of applications. So we have the ability to control those privileges. This is going to lower the attack surface. If half the people in your organization are admins on their machines, it's not just about them changing things. If a piece of malware comes in your environment, it's going to run a lot freer. We want to reduce the number of admins that you have, and this tool can do that by giving a more nuanced approach to what's out there and what applications are, or what users are having administrative rights. So thank you for putting that out to talk about that privilege escalation. That's a great answer to lowering that particular piece of the attack surface. All right, a couple more questions here. We've got a question about, do I have to have an existing Ivanti tool to be able to implement this? The answer is no. Neurons is essentially a standalone tool. You don't have to have anything with Ivanti. We integrate with those other things with our connectors here, and we can talk to our various other products. But if you don't own anything, that's perfectly okay. We can still go and operate it standalone. And you can see we can connect to other things like Dell Warranty or our Pulse Profiler or Office 365, things like that. But that's not a requirement. You can still operate it as a standalone. Another question here. Want to see how your agent does self-healing. So we have a couple of different contexts of that. The agent itself has its own healing process to replace, deleted files and things like that. But we also have an entire section called healing, an entire function that's our Neurons for Healing platform that gives us the ability to create what's called a neuron. And I apologize, that's a little bit confusing, but the overall platform is called Neurons. And then this is, a neuron for healing inside of the overall platform, where we can look for something, look for an application crashing or BitLocker status or CPU usage or device usage or TLS connections or anything like that. So you could go in here and say something like that, find a missing process. If they are not running avsoftware.exe, that's a problem. I want to do an action. That action could be to notify the user. Maybe they care about that. Hey, your AV is not running. We all know how users are. That's probably fruitless exercise, but maybe I want to go down here and start a service. Let's go start a service and start up the avservice.exe. And maybe you want to fork off of that and go and create a ticket. So we're going to start the service, but we're also going to go and create a ticket in the ecosystem. So you go and create these actions to help solve some of these problems. Now, I'm a big fan of automation, but I'm a pragmatist towards it. Don't worry about AI replacing your job tomorrow and we're going to have robots write all of our poetry. It's not going to work that way. We need to talk about hyper automation that is taking small, repetitive tasks that things like the help desk are doing and making it automatic there. If you're a fan of the Gartner Magic Quadrant, there is a report that they put out that says, oh, here's how everyone ranks from leaders and things like that. Everyone skips over a lot of the text they put in there. One thing they put in their most recent version of the Magic Quadrant was they said, we believe that a lot of organizations are going to spend their time on functions like this, automating small menial tasks, creating their help desk to try and be more proactive. Instead of just putting out fires, let's create a workflow here that finds bad hard drives by looking at their smart drive status and opening up a ticket based on that, or looks for, low disk space. We've got a disk space free here. How many times does your help desk get a phone call and a half hour into the troubleshooting call, they realize, oh, the hard drive is full? Let's have a query that looks for that 24/7, 365, and then runs a cleanup process if it's actually been full. So this kind of hyper automation at the endpoint is something that we call Neurons Healing. Neurons for Healing is specifically what it's called. That's going to help solve a lot of those problems. So our agent does self-healing on its own, where if a process is missing or something like that, it will replace it. You don't have to go and manage and babysit this. You would be creating these actions. And then when you actually look at them on an individual level, if I actually go back in here and take a look at one of my machines that I have a button over here on the side. Actually, when I go to this next page right here, where a technician could actually run those actions. So sometimes a technician needs to be involved to decide to run it. and then they would actually kick this process off right here. Other times, we don't have a technician run that query. They are actually, having it run automatically, like the free disk space thing. That's just something we're going to watch for 24/7. We don't need a human being to be looking at that and make a judgment call. We'll just say, hey, if the disk space drops below X, then run an action potentially against that. All right. Let's do one last question about testing this out. I think that's a great one to kind of wrap it up with, because we've got a great offer for you here. So please take the survey that shows up at the end of this webinar. And if you want to do a proof of concept, we'll actually give you a $100 Amazon gift card to kick the tires on it. So please hit us up for that if you want to. We're going to have our sales team reach out to you. And so just please reply to them via phone or email when that reach out comes, and ask them for a follow-up. A proof of concept is very easy to set up. Essentially all we need is a couple of test machines and a web browser. That's really all that's it. We don't need a huge amount of infrastructure and disk space and all these other things that we did in the past around doing things like proof of concepts. So very, very easy and straightforward to do. So please fill out that survey that we send out. Also, suggest topics for us to do it. We like this kind of format. It doesn't look like COVID's going away anytime soon. So we're going to be doing this more and more as we go forward. Please suggest topics that maybe you want to talk about. We can kind of keep it interactive and focus on things that would be interesting to you, as well as, we get to feed everyone, have lunch. So thank you, everyone, for attending. I really appreciate it. Like I said, you will be hearing from our team when we reach out. If you have any questions for me particularly, or some of the engineers, any technical questions, or hopefully this got you excited enough to see a one-on-one presentation. This was just kind of a high level talk about ransomware, things like that. We can dive into a lot of the details of our application control, our Neurons for healing, all the other facets as part of that. We'd love to talk to you one-on-one about it. So everyone, thanks again for joining. If you have any questions around lunch or you're still having problems with it, again, hit up that email address and we'll help you out. But thanks everyone for your time. Have a great day.